For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jason Allen. I'm the Maintenance Director for Carmel Partners. Today we're going to review the new OSHA standard in regards to the globally harmonized system. This new standard for OSHA is a requirement that all employees be trained by December 1st of 2013. That is why we are conducting this YouTube version of a training class in order to make sure that we cover the training nationwide for all communities and on-site personnel. So moving on, our agenda today for this course is to review what GHS is, and what the process is for it. We're also going to review the GHS changes to the Hazard Communication Standard. We're also going to look at the GHS important dates, the new labeling requirements, the new safety data sheet format, and training requirements for the globally harmonized system, and SDS forms, also known as safety data sheets. After that training is conducted, we're going to watch a short, brief video, and then we will take a small test at the end, and after that, you will receive your safety data sheet training cards as proof that you took the class. So what is GHS? What does it stand for? What is it? What's the background of it? I'm going to get a little into that now. So GHS stands for Globally Harmonized System for classification and labeling of all chemicals worldwide. So why the change? Labeling systems around the world varied. Systems and classifying and labeling chemicals were often in conflict with each other around the world, so which led to hazards, which led to injuries. Material safety data sheets and container labeling varied so much in layout and design from country to country that they often added to confusion and making mistakes more relevant. Fortunately, the recent introduction of the globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals will change all that and help the work environment be safer. So why are we standardizing it worldwide? One, because work environments worldwide will be safer. And that's number one. That's key. We need to make sure that everyone has a safe work environment at all times. It will also help U.S. companies be more competitive around the world. And OSHA estimates that the globally harmonized system will prevent 43 fatalities and a little over 585 injuries and illnesses annually in the U.S., which is extremely important because, as we all know, safety is first. So now we're going to get into some important dates. The following dates will help to allow a more smoother transition in the United States, as rolling out a new system will take several years. As an employee who will be affected by these changes, there are several dates that have been set forth by OSHA that you should be aware of. By December 1st of 2013, all employers must train their employees on the new OSHA standard. That is why we're conducting this training at this time. By June 1st of 2015, all chemical manufacturers, importers, and distributors must adhere and modify provisions to the final rule and start using the new labeling system. By December 15th of 2015, distributors are not allowed to distribute any chemical without the new labeling or safety data sheet program. As well as June 1st, 2016, employers and manufacturers must make sure that all employees and workers are updated and trained in the proper usage of each chemical, and all PPE and SDS sheets are readily available for those employees and workers. So now we're going to get into the labeling requirements. Hazardous chemical containers are our first line of defense in preventing unwanted injuries. The label tells us everything. They give us warning signals, they give us a little bit of the first aid that we need to know, as well as the name of the product, the hazards of the product. There are several new label elements. First one is the pictograms, as well as signal words, hazardous statements, precautionary statements, which covers in case of fire, first aid, and other important information, product identification, which will give you the product or manufacturer company, the product code, the product name. Supplier's manufacturer identification will give you the company's name, city and state in which they're in, phone number, email, website, that type of information. Now we're going to get into the labeling of the pictograms. The possible hazards that may be represented by these symbols are oxidizer, flammable, acute toxicity, and in this case, with the skull and crossbones, it's deadly. The possible hazards: continuation, corrosive to metal and skin. This is its symbol for explosive. Acute toxicity, which is not as deadly, but it is still very hazardous. Gases under pressure, carcinogens, environment, and aquatic toxicity. These are the labels that we're going to look for, and these are the definitions of what they stand for. So labeling signal words. These are words used to indicate the severity of the hazard and alert employees to the potential hazard. Only two signal words will appear: danger and warning. The danger is more of a severe hazard, and the warning is less of a severe hazard. Not all labels will have signal words. It depends on the severity of the chemical that we're dealing with at the time. So label warnings and precautionary statements. Recommended measures are related to preventing an unwanted incident with that chemical, a response if there is an unwanted reaction or incident with that particular chemical, proper storage of that chemical, and proper disposal of that chemical. So a few examples of the labeling will be: wear respirator protection. In this case, we're wearing a respirator. And also wash with soap or water, as well as use in a well-ventilated area. These are some of the signals that you will see in the warnings and precautionary statements on the labels. The GHS labeling conclusion. Though the GHS does not specify the label's actual layout, the below three standard elements should always be located together on the label: pictograms, signal words, and hazard statements. We're going to move on to secondary containers. Currently at this time, an original container comes out to the community with the new labels and the new SDS sheets. OSHA has not made changes to general requirement to workplace secondary labeling. So as we get the first label and we transfer first container, and we transfer that first container into a secondary container similar to the spray bottle, all secondary containers must be filled out properly. There's no change currently to this particular type of bottle. The things that we need written down on the bottle that has a label on the back of it from the manufacturer are date and time the chemical was put into the secondary container, the name of the individual that put it in the secondary container, and the mixture. If it's 10 parts water to 5 parts bleach, that is what we're going to write on the bottle label itself. Continuing to use labeling requirements of Hazard Communication 1994, all supervisors must provide employees with information on all of the health and physical hazards of the hazardous chemicals used at the community, which we are currently doing through our MSDS sheets and our right to know stations in each place chemicals are stored at our communities. So how does this affect me? How does it affect our communities? Well, under the new Hazard Communication Standard, material safety data sheets are now called safety data sheets. Although we don't have to change our right to know stations or our material safety data sheets binders themselves, we do have to put in place the new SDS format, which is a consistent 16-section format pages, into our binders and replace the old MSDS sheets with the new current OSHA standard safety data sheet for the chemicals that we are currently using at the community, as well as chemicals that we will purchase in the future. All supervisors and managers must ensure that the SDS sheets or forms are readily accessible to all employees, which we do very well at each community. In the last 3 years, our OSHA safety training program that each and every one of you have gone through and will go through in 2014 will help guide you in the right direction and make sure that we are safe at work at all times. If it wasn't for you on site, we would have never been able to accomplish what we have in those 3 to 4 years. And I thank you for that. Going forward, when we purchase chemicals from our suppliers, whether they're chemicals that we're currently using or whether they're chemicals that we would like to try, we need to request the new safety data sheets from those suppliers in order to make the change in time. When you order a new chemical or a chemical we're currently using, you simply ask them if they have the new safety data sheet format for that chemical. If they do not at the time, it is okay. But like the training and the dates I gave you earlier, they need to start rolling them out. And we're basically going to take the new safety data sheet and put it in place for the old material safety data sheet. We're going to retain the material safety data sheet for the older chemical, and we're going to store it like we have for up to 30 years. We're either going to file it in a box or we're going to put it on the computer so we can use it at a later date if need be. And we're going to replace that material safety data sheet with the new 16 section format for the SDS sheet. So we're going to go over that format now. The new SDS format, like I said, has a 16 section standardized format. Section 1 is the identification, which includes manufacturer's name, address, contact information. Section 2, hazardous identification, includes all hazardous labeling requirements. Section 3 includes information about the chemical and the ingredients of the chemical. Section 4 is first aid and the requirements for treatment if we have an unwanted exposure to that chemical. Section 5 is firefighting measures. This will list suitable fire equipment to be used and fire hazards if we did have an ignition of that chemical. Section 6 is accidental release measures. This lists emergency procedures that need to be followed if there is a release. Section 7, handling the storage. Obviously, that includes how we're going to handle that chemical or how we're going to store that chemical properly, whether we need to store it away from other chemicals to prevent a mixture or we need to store it in a fire cabinet because it's flammable. Section 8, exposure controls and personal protection, lists OSHA permissible exposure limits and the PPE that is needed, personal protective equipment that is needed in order to handle or use that particular chemical. Section 9 is the physical and chemical properties. Section 10 is stability and reactivity of the chemical. Section 11 is the toxicological information, which includes routes of exposure. Section 12, 13, 14, and 15 are all transportation related in regards to transporting that chemical. OSHA at this time is not regulating Section 12 through 15. There are other agencies in the government and throughout the world that are going to regulate these particular sections of the SDS format. In Section 16, other product information includes the date of the preparation of the chemical and the last revision that was done to the chemical. So here are a couple helpful links. We have OSHA.gov. We also have OSHA.gov publications, hazard communication, quick card, safety data. And we also have OSHA.gov other sources. These 3 websites are perfect and wonderful tools so you can further your education when it comes to the new OSHA standard for safety data sheets and labeling. So our training summary, today's training program included globally harmonized system background, all the information you need to know, important dates to remember, labeling requirements, and one example of that is the pictograms. The safety data sheets, also known as SDS sheets, the format the new 16 standard category format, training requirements. We're now going to watch a brief video that will also go over everything that we just did. It will help you to understand the situation and the severity of the changes that are coming a little bit more. You also will have resources. There's handouts for this particular training, so you're able to take these with you and either read them on your break, review them during work, take them home and read up on them a little bit more so you know more about the situation. And as always, if you had any questions in regards to any of this training, please feel free to contact me at any time. Once again, my name is Jason Allen. I'm the Maintenance Director for Carmel Partners. My email address is jallen@carmelpartners.com. My office number is 303-691-3250, or you can reach me on my cell if I'm not available in my office at 720-201-6884. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I thank you for your dedication to workplace safety. We couldn't do it without you. You truly make a difference, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Millions of people have no problem reading this sign. But what if you're not one of them? What if this was information you needed? Even worse, if your safety depended on understanding this warning, would you know what to do? How about now? When information is critical, it's important that everyone finds it clear and easy to understand. That's the idea behind the Globally Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals, or GHS. Around the world, raw materials travel back and forth across borders, and some of those materials are potentially hazardous. To stay safe, it's critical that workers who come in contact with these chemicals understand how to handle them safely, regardless of where they came from. In this program, we'll discuss what is the GHS, GHS labels, safety data sheets, and safety checklists. More than ever, we live in a global economy, and much of that world economy is built around the use of chemicals. In the United States alone, 650,000 chemicals in the workplace are classified as hazardous. And from their production to their use and transport, they pose a risk to workers and the environment. The challenge is to keep these workers well informed and safe. Until recently, in the United States and around the world, various agencies met this challenge by developing their own HAZCOM procedures. But these various systems of classifying and labeling chemicals were often in conflict with each other. For example, a substance with acute oral toxicity at this level could be labeled anything from toxic or harmful to not dangerous or non-toxic, depending on the country it was produced in. Making things even more complex, material safety data sheets and container labels, the primary means of relaying this information, could vary so much in layout and design from country to country that they often added to the confusion, making mistakes more likely. With the help of the United States and many other countries, the United Nations developed the GHS to ensure that the handling instructions for hazardous chemicals are clear and easily understood worldwide. The GHS is a non-binding agreement, meaning it's up to each country to decide whether they will adopt it and how it will be implemented. For countries like the United States, transitioning to a new standard has meant retooling a sophisticated regulatory process that's already in place, but the benefits have made it worth the effort. Not only does adopting the GHS allow U.S. companies to remain competitive around the world, but more importantly, it increases safety for workers. To allow for a smoother transition, in the United States, rolling out the new system will take several years. As a worker who will be affected by the changes, there are several dates that have been set by OSHA that you should be aware of. By December 1st, 2013, employers must train workers on the new label elements and SDS format. By June 1st, 2015, chemical manufacturers, importers, distributors, and employers must comply with all the GHS-based changes to the OSHA standard, although distributors have until December 1st, 2015, before they must discontinue shipping any chemical products that do not have GHS labels. Finally, by June 1st, 2016, employers must update alternative workplace labeling and hazard communication programs as necessary, and provide additional worker training for newly identified physical and health hazards. What does the GHS look like? The system standardizes two critical areas of hazard communication: how hazardous chemicals are classified and the methods used to communicate those hazards. Breaking it down further, there are three types of hazards: physical, health, and environmental. And there are two types of communication: labels and safety data sheets. More about those later. Under physical hazards, there are 16 categories. 10 categories under health hazards, and environmental hazards has 2. While we won't spend time on each of the 28 categories here, it's worth emphasizing that the chemicals that fit into this list can be very dangerous. Obviously, anyone handling hazardous chemicals must make sure that they know what they're doing to avoid injuring themselves and others. Fortunately, whether a chemical puts you at risk for physical hazards, health hazards, or both, you can protect yourself. And for every chemical classified as hazardous at your worksite, the information you need to stay safe is available to you. When it comes to information about hazardous chemicals, container labels provide a sort of first line of defense. At the source of potential contact with a chemical, a container label provides important information about how to handle that chemical safely. While they're not as informative as safety data sheets, it's critical that an appropriate identifying label is affixed to any container that holds hazardous chemicals. Fortunately, the GHS has simplified interpreting the hazard information on labels by standardizing 3 key label components: symbols, signal words, and hazard statements. Under this system, no matter where a chemical originates from, the same words and symbols are always applied to a specific hazard classification. When looking at a GHS label, the first thing you're likely to notice is the symbol, which is also called a hazard pictogram. This is a graphic representation of the type of hazard present. On container labels in the workplace, pictograms are in the shape of a white diamond and have a red border. Depending on the hazard, one of 9 possible black symbols appears in the center. Among the possible hazards that may be represented by these symbols: oxidizers, flammables, explosives, acute toxicity, corrosives, gases under pressure, carcinogen, environmental toxicity, and irritant. An entirely separate set of pictograms is used for the transport of hazardous materials. More varied in design, they convey a shipped product's potential hazards. Signal words are the second element on a GHS label and are used to indicate a hazard's relative level of severity. There are only 2 signal words: danger and warning. Danger is used for more severe hazards. Warning is used for hazards that are less severe. Some lower-level hazards don't use any signal words. Hazard statements are the third element on a GHS label. These standard phrases are assigned to specific hazards based on their class and category. Their purpose is to briefly describe the nature and degree of the hazard. Though the GHS doesn't specify the label's actual layout, these 3 standardized elements, pictograms, signal words, and hazard statements, should always be located together. 4 other important elements also appear on every GHS label. Precautionary statements describe the recommended measures that should be taken to minimize or prevent adverse effects from hazardous chemicals. In other words, they amount to a briefly worded list of best work practices, such as do not allow contact with air, avoid breathing fumes, keep in original container, and brush off loose particles from skin. Precautionary statements cover 4 areas: prevention, response, in case of accidental spillage or exposure, storage, and disposal. Product identifier is just that, the chemical identity of the substance and proper shipping name. This should match the product identifier found on the safety data sheet. Supplier identification. This is the name, address, and telephone number of the manufacturer or supplier of the substance or mixture. And finally, supplemental information is information not specified or required under the GHS. In some cases, this may be additional safety information such as a chemical's physical state, the routes of exposure, or a hazard not yet incorporated into the GHS. What's new about the GHS's safety data sheet? First off, the name. Prior to the GHS, OSHA typically called this document the Material Safety Data Sheet, or MSDS. You'll now see it referred to as the Safety Data Sheet, or SDS. But with or without the M on the front, the document serves the same purpose. It is a chemicals fact sheet. While container labels are an important source of information, safety data sheets go into much greater detail about a chemical's hazards and how to protect yourself. For this reason, you should consult the safety data sheet for any hazardous chemical you work with. In the past, the format or look of MSDSs was allowed to vary widely. Now, additional information is required and it must be placed within a specific format. The GHS safety data sheet is divided into 16 categories, and the categories appear in the same order on each document, making information easier to find. What are the categories? Here's a brief overview of each. This first section identifies the substance or mixture by product name, lists its recommended uses, and provides the supplier's contact information, including address and phone number. The next section contains the GHS hazard classification for the substance or mixture, along with hazards not covered by the GHS, such as dust explosion. Elements from the container labels, such as precautionary statements and hazard symbols, also appear in this section. By the way, if you're familiar with the NFPA HMIS system of classification, you may have noticed a difference here. Under the old system, hazardous chemicals were ranked from 1 to 4, with the higher numbers indicating a more severe hazard. Under the GHS, however, the classifications go in the opposite direction. Level 4 is less hazardous, Level 1 more hazardous. In Section 3, the material's chemical identity is listed, along with its common name, and such identifiers as its CAS and EC numbers. If the product is a mixture, all hazardous ingredients are listed along with their concentrations. Section 4 contains information on first aid procedures. These are broken down by routes of exposure. For example, what should be done if a toxic substance is inhaled is detailed separately from what should be done if the same substance gets into a worker's eyes or is ingested. In the next section, appropriate methods and extinguishing agents for fighting fires involving the chemical are listed, along with methods that should be avoided. Also listed, hazards specific to that chemical igniting, such as the release of dangerous gases, and the protective equipment and precautions that firefighters should use. Section 6 details what steps should be taken if an accidental release occurs, any special protective equipment that needs to be donned, the emergency procedures that should be followed, and the methods and materials for containment and cleanup. Section 7 provides information on handling the chemical safely. Critical safety precautions, such as avoid breathing vapor and keep chemical away from ignition sources, are found here. Information on storing the chemical safely is also located in this section, including any incompatibility with other stored materials. In Section 8, safe exposure limits are provided, along with appropriate methods to reduce a worker's exposure, such as engineering controls and personal protective equipment. Important physical and chemical properties are listed in Section 9, including odor threshold, evaporation rate, and flash point. Section 10 deals with stability and reactivity. In other words, how stable is the chemical and are hazardous reactions to incompatible materials or specific environmental conditions a possibility. Section 11 provides a concise but complete description of the various health effects caused by contact with the chemical. Information includes likely routes of exposure and the symptoms and illnesses that can develop. For information on the potential impact of a chemical on the environment, look in Section 12, which contains such ecological information as a chemical's ecotoxicity, bioaccumulative potential, and mobility in soil. Section 13 focuses on proper disposal of leftover waste material, including the disposal of any contaminated packaging. In Section 14, the information needed to transport a chemical is supplied: the UN number, the proper shipping name, whether the chemical is a marine pollutant, and other applicable information. Safety, health, and environmental regulations that pertain to the chemical are listed in Section 15. And Section 16 provides a catch-all location for any other information that may be useful to have on the document, including information on the preparation and revision of the safety data sheet. The GHS helps create a safer work environment by providing consistent safety information. But information alone isn't enough. To stay safe, workers must act on that information, maintaining a daily awareness of potential hazards and following correct safety procedures every time a task is performed. Having a checklist of best work practices can help you keep on track during the routine of everyday job tasks. While your own checklist may vary depending on the type of work you do and the chemicals you work with, here are safety measures that anyone who handles hazardous chemicals must be aware of. Know where your facility's SDSs are kept. Comply with each chemical's SDS information. Use only properly labeled containers. Use appropriate PPE when needed. Understand what to do in case of an emergency. Know the location of all eye wash and emergency shower stations in your area. Report every chemical spill, leak, and accident. And if information is unclear or you have questions, ask your supervisor. Communication is only effective if the end user understands it. When mistakes can turn a potential hazard into a very real danger, you need to know how to stay safe. That's why the GHS was developed, to make the critical information on container labels and safety data sheets clear and easy to understand. By using this information and following your facility's best work practices, you can protect yourself and your coworkers.
Once again, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to run through this training with us. If you could, please turn your training manuals to page 25, where you can take a quick 10-question quiz, which should only take about 5 or 10 minutes. Once you're done with your quiz, you will review the questions and answers with your manager. If you have any questions, once again, please feel free to contact me at any time. I hope you have a great day, and once again, thank you for your dedication and commitment to making sure every work environment is safe.